In a lavish mansion in Los Angeles, everyone believed they were about to witness a celebration of love. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, champagne glasses clinked softly. Music, laughter, everything looked like a perfect picture. But then, in the middle of the applause, David Miller, the man everyone admired, raised his glass, his smile full of pride, and he coldly declared, "Tonight, my wife, Olivia Harris, will give birth, right here in the pool, in front of you all." The room froze. Many thought he was joking, but Olivia knew better. This was no celebration. It was a death sentence, read out by her own husband. She gripped her hand tightly over her 8-month belly. Her heart raced, breath unsteady. The dazzling lights suddenly turned into knives stabbing straight into her chest. The hall buzzed with laughter, but Olivia felt herself reduced to prey, offered up for entertainment. Do you see the injustice? A woman who was once a beloved singer across the nation, now nothing more than a sacrifice in her husband's cruel game of power. If this story makes your heart ache, stay with me. Because what happened next shook the whole of Los Angeles. Years before the night of shame, Olivia Harris was the pride of a nation. Stadiums filled to the very last seat, audiences holding their breath as her voice soared. She was more than a singer. She was the golden voice of America, a woman whose songs carried the sorrow and hope of millions. When Olivia sang, people wept openly. Soldiers returning home clutched her records. Mothers sang her melodies to their children. She was not only heard, she was felt. But behind the curtain, the price of glory weighed heavy. Endless rehearsals, endless tours, interviews that drained her spirit, nights of applause followed by mornings of emptiness. Her body weakened, her mind frayed. The pressure to remain perfect was unrelenting. And then, one fateful night, under blinding lights, her legs gave way. She collapsed on stage before thousands. Gasps filled the arena, followed by silence so sharp it pierced deeper than any applause ever had. That was the night Olivia Harris disappeared from the stage. The golden voice was silenced. The legend became a woman hidden in shadows. And in that silence, her heart longed for someone to see her not as a star, but as a fragile soul in need of love. In the quiet that followed her fall, David Miller appeared. A man of wealth, of polished suits and practiced smiles. His presence carried the calm of certainty. To a woman broken by fame, he seemed like a rescuer. He offered her what the stage never could: safety, family, a life without the endless demand to be perfect. His words wrapped around her like a promise. With me, you will never need to stand under those harsh lights again. You will only need to be loved. Olivia, still trembling from the wounds of her collapse, wanted to believe. She wanted to feel the warmth of belonging. His touch felt steady. His gaze carried admiration. In David's arms, she saw the home she had always yearned for, but never found. She imagined laughter at a dinner table, a child's voice in the halls, mornings without fear of collapsing under the weight of the world. And so, with tears in her eyes and a heart desperate for peace, Olivia said yes. Yes to David Miller. Yes to a life she thought would be gentle. She did not yet know that the arms she trusted were chains waiting to tighten around her every breath. Marriage to David began with flowers and praise. But quickly, the mask slipped. Compliments turned to criticism. Concern turned to control. He studied every move, every word, every choice Olivia made. She was no longer the voice of America. She was his possession. He mocked her past. You think you were a star? You were just a trend, and trends fade. Each word was a knife, severing pieces of her confidence. When she tried to hum a melody in the kitchen, he sneered, "No one wants to hear that anymore." The voice that once filled arenas was reduced to silence in her own home. Jealousy grew wild inside him. He isolated her, cut her off from friends, distanced her from those who once celebrated her. "They were never real," he said. "I am the only one who cares for you." She began to believe it. The Olivia who once stood tall before millions now lowered her eyes before one man. The woman who sang to lift others was now silenced by the one who vowed to love her. And every day, the golden voice faded further, swallowed by the shadows of a marriage that became her cage. It was in that silence that Sophia Lee appeared. Young, elegant, with a smile sharpened like a blade. She entered their lives under the disguise of a friend. She praised Olivia in public, held her hand at events, and spoke sweetly of sisterhood. But behind closed doors, her whispers carried poison. "David deserves more than a wife who hides from the world," she breathed, her voice smooth as silk. She lingered close to him, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm as though she already belonged there. Olivia saw it, but her protests only fueled his disdain. "Don't be jealous," David snapped. "She's kind to you, while you sulk." Soon, Sophia's presence grew bolder. She joined dinners, sat at David's side, charmed the guests. To the world, she looked like a dear companion. To Olivia, she was the shadow tightening around her marriage. And one night, in the quiet of a hallway, Sophia leaned close, her words slicing the last of Olivia's pride. "You are just a shadow," she whispered. "I am his future." Olivia's heart shattered. The golden voice of America had become a silent witness to her own erasure, while another woman claimed the stage of her life. When Olivia discovered she was pregnant, she clung to hope. She imagined the news might soften David's heart, that fatherhood could awaken a gentler side. For a brief moment, she believed the child might save their broken marriage. But David saw the baby not as life, not as love, but as opportunity. Before flashing cameras and eager reporters, he declared his plan with a triumphant smile. "Our child will be born in water," he announced, "a symbol of strength, a spectacle for the world to see." The words echoed through microphones, headlines already racing across screens. He was not speaking of family. He was selling a performance. Olivia's face drained of color. The baby she carried, the child she whispered to in the quiet of night, was now paraded as a prop. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. "Please, this is dangerous," she begged. David waved her off. "Do not embarrass me. This will prove our legacy." The press applauded. Investors smiled. Cameras flashed. And Olivia, clutching her stomach, felt terror coil around her heart. The world saw a glamorous announcement. She felt only the crushing weight of betrayal. Her right to protect her unborn child was stripped away before the eyes of millions. The night of the event arrived. The hall shimmered with chandeliers, laughter hovering like smoke. Guests sipped champagne, their whispers blending with the clinking of crystal glasses. Yet, beneath the glamour, a chilling silence waited. Everyone knew what was coming. David stood at the center, his smile broad, his voice commanding. He raised a glass, his presence swelling like a king addressing his court. "Tonight," he declared, "you will witness history. My wife will give the world a gift no one has ever seen." Applause rippled, thin and nervous. Olivia's hands trembled against the silk of her gown. Her breaths were shallow, her eyes darting across the crowd. No faces offered comfort, only cold curiosity. She leaned toward David, her lips barely moving. "I will die," she whispered, her voice a plea swallowed by the music. But David did not flinch. His hand gripped her arm with iron strength. His smile never faltered as he signaled the staff. Slowly, step by step, she was led closer to the water's edge. The surface glittered under the lights, waiting like a grave. Every tick of the clock pressed heavier. The guests held their breath, and Olivia felt hers slipping away before she even touched the water. Her foot slipped first. Then the world tilted. Olivia crashed into the water, the sound sharp against the hush of the hall. Gasps rose, but none moved. Cold rushed over her body. The gown clung to her skin, heavy, suffocating. She kicked, but the silk dragged her deeper. A sudden sting burst in her head. Blood streamed from her nose, spiraling crimson through the clear water. It floated like ribbons, visible even to those sipping wine at the edges. Murmurs rippled across the crowd, yet not a single hand reached out. On the balcony, Sophia's laughter cut through the tension. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Every woman bleeds when she gives life," she called out, her tone mocking. "It's nothing unusual." The cruelty laced in her voice sliced through Olivia's heart more sharply than the water itself. Olivia's arms thrashed. She clawed at the surface, each gasp dragging in more water than air. The once revered voice of America was reduced to choking cries. And around her, cameras flashed. Guests watched, horrified yet paralyzed, trapped between fear and fascination. Her suffering had become a spectacle, her pain entertainment, and her dignity bled out, drop by drop, into the pool for all to see. Olivia broke the surface for a moment, gasping, coughing blood into the water. Her body shook violently. One arm wrapped protectively around her stomach, the other flailed for support. She reached toward David, eyes wide with desperation. But instead of comfort, his grip on her shoulder tightened, forcing her upright. His lips pressed close to her ear, words as cruel as the hand that held her. "Stand. Do not make me look weak." His teeth clenched. His voice hissed. To him, her suffering was not tragedy, it was embarrassment. The cameras zoomed closer. The crowd parted only enough to capture better angles. Guests raised their phones, recording, streaming, documenting her collapse. Some whispered, some smirked. None stepped forward. In a room full of power and wealth, not one dared intervene. Olivia's knees buckled. She fell forward, clutching her belly, convulsions racking her body. The silk gown spread across the surface, torn, stained with crimson. Her cries echoed, hollow against the glittering walls. The indifference pierced deeper than David's words. The silence of hundreds screamed louder than any jeer. A nation's golden voice begged for mercy, and the world responded with lenses and lights. They came to witness history. Instead, they watched a woman drown in shame. 2 guards moved forward at David's command. Their hands gripped Olivia's arms, dragging her toward the edge. She pleaded, her voice broken. "Please, please, not like this." Her cries melted into the hum of the crowd, dismissed like background noise. Without pause, they shoved her into the center of the pool. The splash echoed like a gunshot. She sank fast, her body heavy, her gown swallowing her whole. The water enveloped her in silence, a cold coffin closing in. Her chest burned, her lungs screamed. Bubbles fled her lips as she clawed toward the surface, but exhaustion pulled harder, her arms weakened. The baby inside her shifted violently, a reminder that she was not alone in the fight. She tried again, but darkness pressed closer. Above, laughter and chatter blended with the mechanical clicks of cameras. To the crowd, it was a spectacle. To Olivia, it was death. Her vision blurred. Lights fractured into streaks. The world narrowed to a tunnel of black. Her fingers stretched upward, reaching for salvation that never came. Blood swirled around her gown, turning white to scarlet. And then, with her last breath escaping, Olivia Harris sank toward the bottom, silence closing over the golden voice of America. The crowd gasped as a figure cut through the glittering surface of the pool. A tall man, broad-shouldered, plunged into the icy water with no hesitation. It was Michael Anderson, the billionaire known across America for his empire, his power, his wealth. Few in the room knew that long before the money, he had been a young boy who listened to Olivia's voice on the radio, finding courage in every note she sang. His strong arms wrapped around her trembling body. Her head lolled against his chest, lips pale, eyes half shut. He pulled her up, breaking the surface in one powerful surge. Water cascaded down his face as he held her close, shielding her from the hungry cameras. Guests fell silent. Champagne glasses lowered. The laughter stopped. In the stillness, Michael's figure rose like a savior carrying the woman who once carried a nation with her songs. He pulled her to the edge, lifting her with all his strength, laying her across the marble floor. Olivia coughed, blood staining her lips. He bent low, his voice urgent but tender. "Breathe. Please, just breathe." His chest heaved, but his grip never faltered. Against the silence of betrayal, Michael's arrival became the sound of hope. The silence shattered with a furious roar. David stormed forward, face twisted with rage. His voice boomed through the hall, shaking with fury. "That is my wife! You have no right to touch her!" His words echoed, dripping with ownership rather than care. Michael turned his head, his dark eyes cutting through the noise. He stood tall, dripping water, his suit clinging to him like armor. He looked at David with calm defiance, his voice deep, unwavering. "A husband does not drag his wife toward death. You lost that right the moment you tried to kill her." Gasps swept across the crowd. Guests whispered, shifting uneasily. Cameras turned, catching every sharp word. David's fists clenched, his face red. He spat, "You don't know anything about us." Michael stepped closer, towering in presence, though he spoke softly. "I know what love is, and what you did tonight was not love." His hand rested protectively on Olivia's shoulder as she shivered. The contrast stood clear. One man raged for control. The other stood firm for compassion. For the first time, David's power faltered before the eyes of those who once bowed to him. Sophia Lee glided forward, her smile sweet, her voice dripping with false concern. She crouched beside Olivia, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. "Oh, Olivia," she cooed, loud enough for the cameras. "What a tragedy. We're all so worried for you." Her performance was flawless, her tone polished. But Michael's glare froze her in place. His eyes narrowed, sharp with disgust. He leaned just close enough for her to hear. "Do not pretend. Everyone here sees what you are." The words struck harder than a shout. Sophia's smile faltered. The cameras clicked furiously, catching her expression mid-shift. For the first time, her mask cracked under the glare of the crowd. Murmurs grew. Heads turned. Whispers sharpened. David tried to bark over the noise, but every lens, every microphone caught the contrast. A husband snarling, a mistress faltering, and a billionaire shielding the broken woman at the center. Images flooded live feeds within seconds. Cruelty in Beverly Hills blazed across social media. In that moment, the polished empire David built began to crumble. The mask had fallen. The world no longer saw power, they saw a villain. Olivia stirred faintly in Michael's arms, her lips trembling. Her breath was shallow, broken, slipping through clenched teeth. She whispered one fragile word, her voice weak as air. "The baby." Michael bent low, panic flashing across his steady face. His chest tightened at her plea. He pressed her closer, shielding her from the cold marble. "Stay with me," he urged. His voice cracked. Then louder, with force that filled the hall. "Call an ambulance, now!" Guests scrambled. Phones appeared. Frantic calls shouted into receivers. For the first time, movement broke the paralysis of the crowd. Olivia's hand clutched his sleeve, her grip trembling, her eyes half closed. Tears streaked her face, mixing with the water still dripping from her hair. Michael brushed her cheek, his hand shaking though his voice fought to stay strong. "Don't give up. You're not alone. Not anymore." His words cut through the chaos, a fragile thread of hope. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Footsteps thundered as medics burst into the hall. Michael refused to release her, carrying her until they forced him to place her on the stretcher. His voice followed her every step. "Fight, Olivia. Fight for your life." The ambulance tore down the streets of Los Angeles, lights blazing red against the night. Inside, Olivia's body convulsed, blood staining the sheets beneath her. The medics pressed, cut, shouted commands. Machines beeped in urgent rhythm. Michael sat at her side, his suit soaked, his hands trembling as he gripped hers. He had faced boardrooms of power, battles of billions, but never had he felt fear like this. His thumb brushed the back of her hand, desperate to anchor her to life. "Don't leave me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not now. Not like this." Her face was pale, lips blue, breaths shallow and fading. He leaned closer, his forehead touching her hand. For the first time, his armor of strength cracked, revealing the boy who once clutched her records for comfort. He whispered, not to the medics, not to the world, but to the woman who once gave him hope. "You sang me through my darkest nights. Let me hold you through yours." The ambulance roared. Every second stretched like eternity. Michael's grip tightened. He could fight wealth, power, enemies. But in that moment he fought only against silence, praying that Olivia Harris would find her voice again. The hospital lights glared white above Olivia's fragile body. Machines screamed in sharp tones. Her chest stilled, the steady rhythm of life vanishing into silence. Doctors shouted orders, their voices urgent, cutting through the air. "Clear!" A surge of electricity jolted her frame. Blood spilled from her side, soaking the sheets, a river too heavy to stop. For one moment, hope flickered, then faded. The monitor stayed flat, a cruel straight line. Panic filled the room. Another shock, another cry. Still nothing. In the corner, a tiny form was rushed out. The cries that should have filled the halls never came. The silence was louder than thunder. A nurse shook her head, her eyes heavy with sorrow. The child was gone. The scene held two tragedies at once: a mother's body, failing before their hands; a child, never given a first breath; blood and silence intertwined, grief saturating every corner of the room. The golden voice of America hovered at the edge of death. Her baby had already crossed it. And in that sterile chamber, hope hung by the thinnest of threads, stretched between loss and the desperate fight to bring Olivia back. Outside the operating room, Michael Anderson pressed both hands against the glass. His forehead rested there too, as though the barrier might break with the weight of his despair. The billionaire, the man who conquered markets and men alike, now stood helpless as a child. Through the window, he saw the chaos of doctors moving, wires tangled, blood pooling. Each second felt like a blade. His chest ached with a pressure he could not release. He whispered words no one else could hear. "Please, save her. Don't take her from this world." His voice cracked. The sound was swallowed by the hum of the hospital, but his lips kept moving. Memories stormed through him, of his younger self, listening to her songs when he had nothing but hunger and dreams. She had once lifted him when he was drowning in despair. Now she lay drowning, and he could do nothing but beg. His fists clenched. His shoulders shook. Yet his prayer was silent. His strength dissolved into trembling. Power, wealth, fame, none of it could reach her now. Only the fragile hope that the woman behind that glass would fight her way back to life. Hours passed before the chaos calmed. At last, Olivia's chest rose weakly, her breath shallow but real. The doctors sighed relief, stepping back from the brink. She had survived, but survival came with loss. When her eyes fluttered open, the room was quiet. Her hand drifted instinctively to her belly. Empty. Cold. Her lips trembled as realization struck. She turned to the nurse, eyes wide with panic. "Where is my baby?" Her voice broke, raw with terror. Silence lingered too long. The nurse bowed her head, tears falling freely. That silence was the answer. Olivia's scream ripped through the hospital walls. She clawed at the sheets, shaking her head, desperate to deny what her body already knew. "No! My baby! Please, bring me my baby!" Her cries cracked like shattered glass. Her chest heaved, her arms wrapped around nothing but emptiness. She sobbed until her body convulsed, until her voice frayed to nothing but broken gasps. The golden voice of America, once powerful enough to move a nation, was reduced to a mother's wail of grief. Her heart bled louder than the monitors, louder than the machines. In that moment, Olivia's soul broke under the weight of loss. Michael rushed to her side the moment the doctors allowed it. He found her trembling, her face buried in her hands, tears soaking the pillow. She looked smaller than he had ever imagined, fragile, broken, emptied of hope. Without a word, he sank beside her. His hands were steady though his heart quaked. He drew her into his arms, holding her as though he could shield her from the world. She did not resist. Her body collapsed against his chest, her sobs muffled against him. "You are not alone," he whispered into her hair. His voice was soft, trembling, but sure. "You will never be alone again. I'm here. I swear to you, I am here." Her cries shook harder at his words. She gripped his shirt, as if afraid he too would vanish. For years, she had been silenced, humiliated, stripped of dignity. Now, in her grief, she found a space where she could weep without shame. Michael rocked her gently, his embrace firm, his presence unyielding. The world outside was cruel, but in his arms she was safe. Amid her heartbreak, a fragile seed of trust was planted. Protective love, soft and steady, cradled her pain. While Olivia clung to Michael's arms, the world outside shifted. News broke across networks. Images of the night spread like fire. The cruelty of David Miller stood exposed. Police arrived at his mansion, sirens flashing against marble walls. Guests testified. Cameras streamed his downfall live. David was dragged in handcuffs, fury etched across his face. Sophia Lee slipped away. Her beauty turned pale with fear, vanishing into shadows as the empire collapsed. Investors withdrew. Contracts dissolved. The kingdom he built on control and spectacle crumbled overnight. Yet, inside the cold bars of the county jail, his rage burned hotter. He slammed fists against metal, eyes red with vengeance. His voice carried down the corridors, a guttural snarl that shook the air. "She thinks she has escaped? She has not. She will never escape me." Even stripped of power, his words dripped with poison. Guards turned away, unease in their faces. For Olivia, healing had just begun. For David, obsession was far from over. The villain's vow hung heavy in the darkness. The battle was not finished. The shadow of his threat stretched far, promising that Olivia's freedom would still come at a price. The story exploded across every screen. Headlines screamed, "Black wife nearly killed by husband, saved by billionaire." News anchors replayed the footage again and again. Olivia dragged into the water, Michael leaping to her side. The world watched, horrified, and then outraged. On social media, her name rose like a storm. Justice for Olivia trended in every city, the words typed by women who saw their own pain in her eyes. Mothers, daughters, survivors. They rallied, flooding the internet with messages of solidarity. Videos of David's cruelty went viral, dissected by millions. Each clip fueled the fire. Olivia, once silenced and hidden, now became a symbol. Her broken voice turned into a rallying cry. Strangers wrote that she gave them courage. Others demanded his punishment. No longer was she just a singer of the past. She was now the face of resilience, her suffering a mirror to the injustice endured by countless women. The noise grew louder. Media trucks swarmed outside the hospital. Protesters held signs demanding accountability. Olivia had been alone in her pain for so long, but now the nation stood beside her. The golden voice of America had returned, not in song, but in the cries of millions who demanded her justice. The chaos outside was deafening, but Michael carved a shield around her. He hired security guards who stood at every door, every window, their eyes sharp, their presence constant. Day and night, she was never unprotected. Paparazzi lights still flashed, but they could not reach her anymore. Michael moved her into his estate on the cliffs of Malibu, where the ocean stretched wide, endless, and calm. The house was vast, but his first concern was her safety. She was shown to a room where no camera could intrude, where only silence and the sound of waves remained. That night he spoke to her in the dim light of the study. His words were not grand. They were steady, quiet, true. "I will protect your body, but more than that, I will protect your heart." Olivia's eyes welled with tears. No one had said such words to her in years. She had been guarded like property, paraded like a trophy, but never cared for as a soul. Michael's promise pierced the shell she had built. For the first time since her fall, she felt not trapped, not silenced, but sheltered. A safe haven, a space where she might begin to breathe again. But David's obsession did not die behind bars. With money hidden and allies still loyal, he plotted. From his cell, he sent orders. Hired men, ruthless and armed, were dispatched. Their target was clear: finish what he had begun. One night, under the pale glow of hospital lights, they struck. Shadows slipped through corridors. Nurses screamed as masked figures stormed the floor. Olivia's room shook with the clash of violence. Michael was there. He had refused to leave her side. When the men burst in, he stood between them and her bed. No hesitation, no fear, only fury. The first lunged, knife flashing. Michael caught his wrist, twisting until the blade clattered away. Another swung, fists flying. Michael's strength, raw and unpolished, slammed him back into the wall. Blood streaked across his knuckles, but he did not falter. Alarms blared. Guards rushed in, wrestling the rest to the ground. Michael stood breathless, chest heaving, his suit torn, his hands trembling with rage. Behind him, Olivia sat frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding. He turned to her, voice hoarse but steady. "No one will touch you, not while I breathe." The room reeked of violence, but also of victory. He had fought and won for her life. In the darkness of his cell, David seethed. The news of the failed attack reached him like acid on an open wound. He paced the narrow floor, muttering to himself, fists clenching until his knuckles split. His reflection in the steel sink glared back, twisted, hollow, mad. "She was nothing without me," he snarled. His voice grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls. "I made her. I gave her meaning. Without me, she is dust." He slammed his fists against the bars, metal rattling with every strike. Other inmates watched from a distance, unsettled by the frenzy. His eyes burned with obsession, his hair disheveled, his face contorted with hate. "She thinks she can rise again?" he screamed. "She will never rise without me." Spit flew as he roared, his voice breaking. He clawed at the air, at the bars, at the ghost of the woman who refused to die. The guards ignored him, though unease flickered in their eyes. David's empire was gone, but the madness inside him only grew. He was stripped of wealth, of power, of freedom. Yet the obsession remained, devouring what little was left of his soul. In the silence of his cell, his rage became his only companion. Time passed in quiet rhythms. The waves outside Michael's estate rolled steady, their crash against the rocks a song of calm. Olivia often stood at the window, her eyes tracing the horizon, searching for pieces of herself she thought were lost. Michael joined her one night, the house hushed in sleep. He offered no speeches, no grand declarations, only presence. He stood close enough for her to feel his warmth, yet not so close as to press her. The silence between them was gentle. Olivia's voice broke the stillness. "For years, I have been invisible. A voice without a body without a soul. I gave everything, and in the end, I was nothing." Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest. Her eyes glistened with tears. She turned toward him, her voice softer now, fragile but true. "For the first time in so many years, I feel like I am human again." Michael's hand reached for hers. She did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined, fragile at first, then steady. He looked into her eyes, seeing not the broken woman, but the survivor. In that quiet moment, healing began, not with words, but with love unspoken. The night was quiet at Michael's estate. Waves pounded the cliffs, steady and calm. Olivia rested in the living room, her hand wrapped in his. Then, without warning, the earth shook. A thunderous explosion ripped through the walls. Glass shattered. Fire flared. The estate trembled as though struck by lightning. The blast threw them to the ground. Alarms screamed. Flames licked the curtains, swallowing the calm in an instant. Olivia's ears rang, her body frozen with shock. Michael pulled her up, his voice fierce. "It's him. He won't stop." Outside, chaos erupted. Shadows moved through smoke, men sent to finish David's will. Their weapons gleamed, their shouts cut through the night. The air was thick with dust, fire, and terror. Michael shielded Olivia with his body as debris rained around them. He dragged her through the smoke, every step a battle. Sparks burst overhead, timbers cracked, stone fell. The estate, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield. Olivia clung to his arm, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. The assault was not just against walls but against her very survival, and in the chaos Michael's voice steadied her. "Stay close. Tonight we fight for the end." Sirens pierced the night, red and blue lights painting the smoke-filled air. Police stormed the grounds as another blast shook the estate. Michael gripped Olivia's hand, pulling her toward the hidden stairway that led below. He forced open the heavy door, guiding her into the underground shelter. The concrete walls trembled, but here, for a moment, she could breathe. His eyes met hers, firm, unshaken. "Tonight, he ends. He will not haunt you again." His voice was steady, but his hands shook with rage. Above them, gunfire cracked. Officers clashed with David's hired men. The chaos spilled into the garden, firelight casting monstrous shadows. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the dark. And then, it was over. Police wrestled David Miller to the ground, his body thrashing, his face twisted with madness. His final plan collapsed under the weight of law and truth. In the shelter below, Michael held Olivia close as dust rained from the ceiling. The storm outside reached its final clash. David's power was finished, his hands bound not just by steel, but by justice. And though the night shook with violence, hope broke through for the first time in years. Dragged from the flames, David was shoved into handcuffs, his wrists scraped, his face smeared with ash. His voice bellowed across the night, raw with fury. "You will never escape me, Olivia! Never!" The words spat like venom, clawing through the chaos. Crowds and cameras gathered at the gates. Reporters shoved microphones forward, their lights capturing every furious twist of his face. The world was watching as his empire collapsed in chains. Through the smoke, Olivia stepped forward. Her body weak, her hair disheveled, yet her eyes burned with clarity. For the first time in years, she looked at him without fear. "You lost me long ago," she said, her voice steady, sharp, final. Each word cut deeper than his chains. She did not scream. She did not cry. She spoke with the quiet power of a woman no longer broken. David lunged, shouting, but officers forced him back into the van. His roars faded into the night, swallowed by the slam of iron doors. Olivia stood still, her chest rising with trembling breaths. She was no longer the victim drowning in silence. She was the victor, reclaiming her voice, her life, her dignity, while the man who sought to destroy her vanished in defeat. Time moved forward. Seasons passed. The wounds of the past slowly stitched themselves into scars. One evening, years later, the stage lights rose once more, the curtains parted, and the world saw Olivia Harris standing tall. Her gown shimmered under the glow, her eyes radiant with strength. At her side, Michael stood, his hand resting gently on her back. Beside them, two children, twins with bright eyes, watched their mother take the stage. The audience, thousands strong, rose to their feet before she even sang. Tears glistened in their eyes, applause thundered through the hall. They had come not just to hear a voice, but to witness a resurrection. Olivia gripped the microphone. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then her voice filled the air, rich, unbroken, alive. It carried sorrow, love, survival, and triumph. It was the voice of a woman who had walked through fire and returned with wings. The crowd wept openly. Strangers embraced, their tears falling as they listened. Her story was no longer one of shame, but of rebirth. The golden voice of America had risen again, not from glory, but from ashes. Olivia Harris was no longer a symbol of tragedy. She was a phoenix reborn. Her journey had cost her nearly everything. She had lost wealth. She had lost fame. She had nearly lost her life. And she had lost a child who would never take a first breath. Yet, Olivia Harris stood, not in defeat, but in defiance. She rose because she chose to fight for the most basic right: the right to live, the right to be loved, the right to be free. And in her rise, she carried the weight of countless women who had been silenced, betrayed, or forgotten. Her voice, once drowned by cruelty, now soared again, not only in music, but in every life touched by her story. She became proof that no darkness could erase dignity, that no betrayal could silence love, that no woman had to remain alone in her suffering. Her final words echoed not to a single crowd, but to every heart listening. Strength is not in never falling. It is in rising again when the world tries to bury you. If this story has moved you, share it. Let it reach the women who still feel trapped in silence. Remind them they are not alone. And subscribe so that together every tear can turn into strength and every voice can rise again.